So welcome to another episode of the How to Kick It podcast. I'm here with another very good friend of mine, Egal. I'm always questioning how to say the last name. I want to say Gabay. Is that right?
It's close. It's Gabay.
Gabay. And it's
so we've known each other for 3 years and you still can't say my name correctly. That's good.
I rarely need to use the last name. I most of the time just say Egal or Eagle, depending on which social circles we're in.
Both are wrong.
Both are wrong. So where are we talking today? Where are you at?
So I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, in my hometown. And it's beautiful weather. We got 80 degrees weather today. So it's a beautiful day outside. I'm stuck inside talking to you, so it's going great.
I've never been to Charleston. I've always, you've kind of always talked good and real about it. Would you say it's a domestic place worth visiting?
I would say it's definitely worth visiting. It's there's a lot of history here. A lot of it's ugly history. Obviously, this is where the slave trade began. And so you have some deep-rooted history, but you also have a lot of deep-rooted culture when it comes to food, music, and beautiful scenery as well. So it's worth a visit. A lot of people move here and they enjoy it. They love it. I'm from here, so, if you're from a place, obviously, a lot of the times you're looking to go new places.
I think that's a really good point to bring up. Everybody views their hometown a little differently. You're much more critical when you grow up in a place. You've seen it evolve. You've seen like what you grew up with and maybe the wide-eyed child perspective. And after a period of time, you start to see the cracks. But as a tourist, I've heard great things, great food, great nightlife, beautiful aesthetics. So it's definitely on my list, want to get there at some point.
After the podcast.
After the podcast.
I hold you to that, and you can stay on my couch.
It's recorded. It's documented now that like I have to come and pay a visit. So if I'm not there within a year, then I owe you a Coke or something or whatever you drink these days. So a little bit about Eagle. He's worked as a tour guide all over the world. He's lived in several different countries. He's a man of many talents. He's a person that I got to spend maybe a total of about 2 months with, I think, give or take, on and off. We've been to several different places together. And I was just super excited to get you on the podcast. When I think travel, whatever that word means to you or anybody listening, you antithesize the word travel for me because of the way that you've done it. So I want to get into the professional aspect of, let's dial it back. When was your first real big trip? When did you decide, I want to maybe live abroad, work abroad, stay abroad? What catapulted you into that? What were you doing before that?
That's a great question. I mean, I think, we grow up, and some of us are lucky enough in the United States and abroad as well to travel with our parents when we're young. For me personally, my dad's from Jerusalem, Israel. So, growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, and in the United States, I always wanted to see my father's home. When I was 18, we went there together. And so that kind of really opened my eyes to what else is out there. I mean, it's a completely different world in Israel compared to the United States. Everything's backwards. Everything's different. And it was pretty shocking for me to realize that there's more than just this little bubble that I've always known out there. Sure, we can look at the map growing up and we see TV shows about Australia or this place, that place. But until you're actually there, it's kind of a fantasy.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, no, I mentioned this to a friend the other day that you can get all the insight, all the feedback, see all the pictures, watch all the videos, talk to the friends, but like unless your feet are on the ground in that place, you'll never fully understand what it's like.
Sure. So I think that was the first time I kind of, there was always an adventure. I've always had an adventurous side. But actually going with my dad, meeting my family, trying different cuisines, just the smell of a place and the excitement of a place like Jerusalem, which is a pretty fast place. There's a lot going on, just really shocked me. And I wanted more of that,
What was the most shocking thing that comes to mind in Jerusalem and Israel? I've been myself, but I wouldn't necessarily frame it as shocking. So I'm curious on what took you back.
Sure. So we were, I think it was day 3, and my dad owns an apartment there. So I was going to go for a run. I went for a run, and all of a sudden I'm seeing smoke, and I'm breathing in the smoke, and I had no idea where it was coming from. I turn a corner, and you can see most of Jerusalem. I'm kind of up on a hill, and I just see a massive fire taking place out of a certain area in the city. And you kind of take a step back, and then there's, sirens going by, and the cars aren't really getting out of the way for the ambulances, and things that I'm not used to. Police are going, and there's people pulling over on the side of the road because it's time for prayer. And I just had to really soak that moment in and say to myself, you got to be careful. This isn't, you're not used to your surroundings. You don't speak the language. It just woke me up a bit inside, honestly. So I would say that run. And then, there's a ton of things that happened during that trip that really opened my eyes to the place I was in.
Was that one of your first times out of the U.S.?
That was one of my first times out of the U.S. I went on a cruise when I was 17 to the Bahamas, but I mean, there was no culture shock.
Sure,
there was no
the resort life.
We got all exactly. So there, I don't even consider that really international travel because I didn't experience any of the kind of shock that you get when you enter a new country by yourself or with a friend. And you're as an adult, right? I mean, I'm still with my parents at that point.
Sure.
So yeah, I would say that was my first time kind of getting a taste of what's out there.
Sure. So that's 10 years ago, give or take?
That would be 11 years ago.
11 years ago, give or take. Yeah, I was there, I think 3 years ago. And I mean, I had similar experiences where things really caught me off guard. If you go to Jerusalem in the old city, you think Israel, you think Jewish people. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, there's a bunch of Muslims and there's the Arab quarter and you have all these security guards. And it's just not what I thought it was going to be during my time, which was only a few days in Jerusalem. Everything was pretty copacetic, peaceful. Everybody got along. A lot of Hasidic Jews praying at the wall, walking around town. But also another side of Jerusalem was super hip. Like there were craft breweries everywhere. The best restaurant in Israel is supposed to be in Jerusalem. I actually couldn't get a reservation there, so I had to eat across the street at its kind of like pop-up location. Amazing food. The markets were awesome, and it was just intertwined between modern and history. It felt like it was like you fast forwarded and went back in time all at once. So it's awesome that you have a connection there with family, and I'm assuming it's on your list to go back again and pay a visit at some point.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. For me, I always get the question, I'm sure you do too, any traveler does, what's your favorite place, right? And there's so many places that, I never went to a place that I didn't love and fall in love with and really enjoy and get a lot out of that experience. So
I get that.
Let's not name any places, but like you said, yeah, maybe a little bit. I still gained a lot from that experience as well. We won't get into that at the moment, but personally, like there's a ton of places that I want to go back to, Israel being one of them, but I would rather go to new places first.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And I think that when you start traveling and you start experiencing these different cultures and seeing these different things, your travel list of the places you want to go only gets bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And it just breeds that desire to want to see more things. So would I want to go back to Israel? Sure. But I'd rather go see some new places first.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, it's so counterintuitive. You bring up a good point that so many people think that when they go to a new place or a place they've really wanted to, they check something off the list and the list has gotten shorter. But in turn, you meet somebody else and they tell you about a place that you might like. Your list only gets bigger. Like if you check 1 or 2 off, you've added 3 or 4. So it's a never-ending list. And I think there's some girl, I forget her name, she just hit the world record or something for youngest person to go to every country. And she's like 21 years old, 22 years old. And I'm very proud of her. Awesome. More people should do something similar. But at the same time, I don't know. It seems a little fast. It's not like you've really been in the throes of every single country and gotten everything out of it. Not to be critical of her at all. I think it's awesome what she's done. She's bringing attention to the possibilities that one can do, especially for women. But I mean, I'd love to spread that out. And, it's not like her travel days are over. She took a sampling or did what do they call it? Like an hors d'oeuvre of every single country. And now she's like, okay, I got a taste, and now I can go back and figure out where I actually want to spend some time. So awesome for her.
Right. Smart play. I mean, and you hear about, I heard about a guy who went to every single country in a year.
Oh my God.
Right. I mean, I don't respect that. I mean, I'm only seeing bad things out of that.
Carbon footprint, man. That's not good.
Carbon footprint, number one, but also you're not experiencing any of the culture.
No.
You're stepping off, maybe having a coffee, and you're right back on the plane to the next place. I think that a year in a place like India or Vietnam compared to a year hitting every country in the world, you're going to gain so much more out of that experience staying in one place that you're not used to compared to a bunch of different places.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I think it almost gets exaggerated. You can gain so much more in a shorter period of time if the country that you're spending time in, that's not your home country, is so far away or vastly different culturally. So if you're American going and spending time, let's say, in Vietnam or the Middle East, and vice versa, if you're somebody from Africa going and spending time in South America, I think when you have such different cultures hitting you and you're forced to spend that much time there, not forced, privileged, however you want to look at it, there's always a circumstance. That's where I think a lot of growth can come versus, like you said, running around hitting every single, how many countries are there? 200? We should know this, but there's like 200 plus countries.
Yeah, I think there's 318, but all speculative. I'm not really sure.
I really think that number's wrong, but I'm not confident in my number either. So I'm not one. But I also know that there's, we'll edit that out. But there's also a bunch of countries that certain countries don't recognize. So depending who you ask in the world, you're going to get a different number, or at least a number from that country. Our representative is going to say, "Oh, we recognize 200 countries, or we recognize 250, but not this one." But we won't get into that. When we started this, I mentioned that you had spent a good amount of time as a travel guide. And for a lot of people that have taken tours, I think this is going to be very relevant to them and give them some insight into the world of what it is like to be a travel guide. Because for some people, they get into the profession, work for a few years, end up working for the company, getting into an administrative role, going down that path. Other people, they just do it for a few weeks to a few months, chalk it up as a great life experience, and kind of go back to a more typical life. You've done a lot of different things as far as travel guide is concerned, and I don't really know the origins of how all that came to be. So I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. And I think, first off, I was privileged enough to do those things. When I was 23, I had a phone call with a good friend of mine. He was in Colombia, the country, and
opposed to Columbia, the city.
Yeah. Just to clarify for my South Carolinian friends, he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, look, there's this backpacking, community that you have no idea about. Growing up in Charleston, South Carolina, you're from LA, right? You're from California."
I'm from Northern California. I live in LA currently, temporarily. Okay. Yes, but
I'm still a much more progressive place.
Sure.
And growing up here, I didn't know what a hostel was. I didn't know that there's people going around backpacking at the age of 18 years old and going to these new countries, and you just travel around and meet people. Nobody did that growing up where I'm from, right? So when I got this call and he started explaining to me about, these travel routes and how much fun he was having.
So wait, who's this guy? Where did he come from? How did you know him?
This is my friend Chaz.
Mm-hmm.
Chaz grew up together. He went and did AmeriCorps when he was 22.
What's I'm not familiar. What's AmeriCorps?
Not familiar with AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps is basically a group nationwide where you can join and you do community service type of projects.
Oh, okay.
Right. And it's the Peace Corps, but for the United States,
Sure,
right?
sure, sure.
So once he did that, what AmeriCorps does is they give you $10,000 you can put towards an outward bound type of program or something like that. So he chose to go to Panama, and he started traveling after that, called me up. He said, I'm going to Europe next. Save up what you can. I didn't have a great job. I just finished community college, and my stepfather had just passed away, and I was at the end of a relationship that was pretty toxic. I said, screw it. So I saved up $4,000. That's all I could manage to get. We looked at a website that allows you to find hostel jobs before you actually get to the place. So I knew my accommodation would be paid for. Once I got to Spain, I had a Eurorail pass for a couple destinations that I paid for beforehand, and no plan. Honestly, first stop was London. I think I spent like $500 in 2 days out of the $4,000. Next stop was Amsterdam, right? So I'm thinking to myself, I'll be home in a month.
If that,
right? I mean, the way we're going, like, I'll be home sooner than later. So we traveled around, me and Chaz. We went our separate ways. I started a job in Spain, and I started meeting people, and more opportunities started to come my way. And before I knew it, I'd been to 13 countries in Europe. I'd worked in 4 different countries doing various jobs, everything from a maintenance man to a website recruiter. And I was really scraping to get by the entire time. It was a very tough time, but it was also one of the most important times of my life because I grew so much during that time. In that 8-month span, I grew more than the past 23 years that I had lived.
Sure.
And once again, Chaz called. He came to Belgium. We were working at the same hostel. He said, let's go to Bangkok. Let's go out to Southeast Asia. It's much cheaper. There's work out there that we can find at hostels. And, I just wasn't ready to give up on myself. I wasn't ready to go home and do the same thing that everybody was doing where I was from. Friends are starting to get married. They're starting to have kids. I'm 24, right? We flew out to Bangkok, and that was a huge culture shock. I remember walking down the street one of the first days under an overpass and, just seeing people living in poverty, and seeing some really hectic things that I hadn't been exposed to up to that point. You reach a point in your travels where you kind of let go, and you let go of trying to control what's going to happen to you next. And for me, that happened in Southeast Asia. And once I let go and kind of just, I had $300 in my pocket. I'm in Laos, and I'm going to Vietnam next. I don't have a job. I've been on the road for 8 months, 9 months at that point. I mean, I'm in a bad spot, but
you're in a tight spot.
I was in a tight spot personally. I didn't, looking back on it, like I didn't realize how tight of a spot I was in. I definitely didn't want to call my parents, right, and do that thing and ask for money. So we went to Hanoi, Vietnam. I walked up to the hostel the first night, and I had that hunger inside of me. I asked the guy who was working there. I saw a video of these tours, and I said, hey, I want to do that. And he said, well, go inside and apply. I start walking inside. He comes inside. He stops me and says, hey, come back tomorrow. And if you're really serious about it, we'll see how you go, and we'll see if we can get you a job.
So where are you right now? This is Hanoi?
This is Hanoi, Vietnam.
Oh, Vietnam. Is this Vietnam backpackers?
This is Vietnam backpackers.
Oh,
yeah.
In Hanoi, they have a great bar. I really like their bar downstairs. It's a nice place.
They have the beautiful formula those guys have created. It's a great time. If anybody gets the chance, go check it out, especially the Castaway Tour.
Oh, be ready for that Castaway Tour. Rest up the days before, because you're going to push yourself mentally, physically, your liver, all the things. It's an awesome tour. Tell me more. Keep coming. Let's hear the rest of this.
So, the next day I come back. Jay was the guy I spoke to the night before. Jay's like, hey, hop on the back of my bike. We're going to go to this rooftop. You're going to meet the rest of the crew. So we go to the rooftop. I meet everybody. Everybody's so cool. Had an interview the day after that. And then the following day after the interview, I was leading a tour of 90 people out to the island with 5 transfers, 2 boats, 2 buses and a taxi. And I was completely out of my element. I was thrown into the deep end. I remember getting at one of the first stops, and everybody's sitting in the hot van. The Vietnamese guy won't turn on the AC because he's trying to save gas. And the other tour guide had to come up and say, "Hey, this is your stop. Get out of the car." And everybody's like, "Why are you sit in the car?" So I make this big announcement, "Hey guys, my first time. So sorry." And it was the best time of my life. I mean, it was 3 months of waking up at 6 a.m. and, yelling and providing the fun and rock climbing and kayaking through caves and jumping off boats and getting cuts all over you and DJing at night. And I was just blown away by that experience. And I think from there, it just really fueled me. I made a good amount of money working that job for 3 months. And I said to myself, I can do this. This is something that, I've worked in 5 countries at this point. I've got money in my pocket again after almost being homeless. And crazy things started to happen. I was traveling down the coast again, got into Cambodia, got robbed going into Cambodia, $200 out of my wallet stolen while I was sleeping on a bus.
Wow.
Arrived in Cambodia, didn't have any friends there, didn't know anyone, didn't know what to do. Decided to go out to an island resort, and that I read some reviews on, and who was working there but a guy that came on my tour who I had made a great friendship with, who I had no idea was working at that place. There's no Wi-Fi on the island. And he's like, "Eagle, what are you doing here, man?" And I'm like, "Dan, you work here? I need a job." And I ended up working there for 2 months. And at that point in time, like, I left there and I went back home, and that's when things got hard again, right?
So where in Cambodia was this before you get into that? Was it Angkor Wat or was it?
Koh Rong Sim Lam. And this was the Mad Monkey hostel chain. The Mad Monkeys resort out there. And those guys, killer product those guys have, man. They're great people, number one, but also they really know how to put on a party. They really know how to they know how to put on a party. They know how to do accommodation the right way in foreign places.
Yeah.
And that's so successful.
I've never stayed at a Mad Monkey personally, but I've only heard good things from all ages, all demographics, all people of different nationalities. So, yeah. So, okay. So you, at this point, right when you're in Cambodia, it's been what, a year and a half, 2 years?
A little over a year.
A little over a year. And at that point you say it's time to go back, or what's the reason that you're heading back home?
Right. So that job didn't pay any money.
What did it do for you? Did it give you accommodation at least? Did they give you some food? Like, was there anything?
Yeah. Free food, accommodation, free drinks.
For the short term, people, for the short term, that's freaking great. For the long term, no, it's not great.
Sure. So I was tired, and I was out of money. I ended up leaving that job because it's tough to live on an island with no Wi-Fi and to provide the party every day for a bunch of new people. And then those people leave and you're constantly creating new connections. But I was burnt out, and I went to Bangkok, spent the last couple of days there, and then I flew home. I needed to reset. I needed to see my family. I needed to make money. And I arrived back home 15 months after I left, and I arrived back home a different person. Started seeing those old friends and kind of catching up, and it wasn't the same. I wasn't on their wavelength anymore. And I got into the solar industry, luckily, and sold enough accounts that year, a very tough year, to be able to take off again.
Sure. So when you came back and touched down and, you met your family, I'm sure there's like a lot of emotion in those moments. I've had similar experience spending time abroad. Once the emotion and things kind of temper down and normality kind of floats through the air and you start talking about what's going on, did you feel like there was a lot of appreciation for what you had spent the last year doing? And you can kind of break this up with like a family attitude and then a friend attitude, because I know those aren't always the same. So you have these two groups, and you're finally starting to share a little bit about what you're doing. I know I have my perspective on this, but what was it like to tell your family what the last year and a half was like, and what was it like to tell your old friends? We're talking like grade school friends, high school friends, college friends. Like, what was it like sharing your story with them? Level of interest, perspective on their part.
Sure. With the family, there was a bit of, obviously, they were proud of me. They were excited, but I kept running into a problem where I would be asked a question about what I did and certain aspects of my trip. And as soon as I would start to tell them about it, they would lose interest.
Mm-hmm.
So it's extremely disheartening to, feel like you have so much to share, but you're the only one that actually knows what you did, and you can't even share that with the people that you love more than anyone in this world, right?
Yeah.
I also found with my family that we were on two different wavelengths when it comes to how we felt about politics. Culture. They would say a lot of things that just simply wasn't true. There was a lot of misconceptions that were very upsetting to me. And I got to a place where I stopped correcting them, and I stopped trying to convince them of what I felt was true and what I felt was reality. And I just started having those conversations with myself. And that's a really lonely point, when you feel like the people that are closest to you don't understand your ideas and what you think is correct and what you've been through, you start to feel very alone.
Yeah.
And so that was a tough pill to swallow. On the flip side of that, with friends, they loved it. Oh, Eagle, you're a legend. You're the man, because none of my friends had ever done that.
Sure.
Had ever left home and went and traveled. And so I was a bit of a pioneer in that respect. But at the same point in time, we had some of those same issues where they had a lot of misconceptions. They were wrong about a lot of things. And I felt like I would be in a room with people that I loved, and I was alone.
Mm-hmm.
I would be in conversations with people that I had known my whole life and I loved, and I was alone the entire time. So, it was a very hard time in my life.
Sure.
That year coming home.
Yeah.
But
well, I think I think you invested something that is the most valuable thing that you can invest in anything, and it's time. You put a year and a half into self-discovery, exploration. You put a lot of investment into something that you had no idea what the real benefit was going to be when you got back. You have these ideas that you're going to grow, that you're going to learn, that you're going to meet some people, maybe build a network of friends. But you don't really know, because coming from your perspective, you didn't really have too many people. Maybe one that is Chad. I already forgot his name. Chaz. Yeah. Chaz, that had, been a little baby pioneer for you. He kind of dipped his toes in and different things, gave you perspective, let you know like, hey, it's going to be okay. To come back to the people that you love, that raised you, that provided for you, and you to tell them a story because they want to hear it, and then 2 seconds later they lose interest. I honestly think it's a cultural thing with, I don't want to say all of Americans, I can only say the people that I've met, but we tie up this idea of travel with a level of status. And they think of like, oh, I've been to this country, and I've been to this country, and I've been to this country. And it's not really what it's about when you do it for long periods of time. If you can jet set and go spend 2 weeks in Europe and then 2 weeks in Canada, and then it's like, oh, I spent like a weekend in South America. That's expensive traveling. That's expensive holiday. But when you're like, I'm going to go to Cambodia and live out on this island with no Wi-Fi for a month and not get paid to do work, most people don't know how to identify with something like that. And what starts as a genuine interest question of how are you, what did you do, they can't connect. And when you can't connect, it's hard to keep the attention span. It's hard to feel connected. And honestly, it's easy to dismiss these things that really are important to your child or your brother or sister or loved one. And even with friends, it's like I had a similar experience. My friends were super excited and super gung-ho. And like, this is a criticism and a compliment, but they're like, now what? You know, like, now that you've done all this, like, what do you have to show for it? And it's like, dude, I didn't ask you, like, after 2 years of like putting all your money in the stock market or like in buying a house, I'm not like 2 years later, I'm like, well, now what are you going to do? You're going to like refinance it and like pull all the equity out and like leverage your capital. It's like, it's almost like they want to challenge you and say, what do you have to show for it now? And it's like, I don't have to show anything for it. That's not what the point of this conversation. You asked me a question, and I'm simply here just trying to cruise about my life, enjoy the heck out of it while I'm still relatively young.
Sure.
But that's not everybody. There's so many people that get inspired and get excited, and they cannot identify, but you know what? They're going to go ahead and make that jump, and then they're going to identify with you, and they're going to call you and say, hey, thanks. I think respectfully, you and I had been to different places and shared some of our stories, and you got me pumped up to go to different places, and I got you pumped up to go to India, actually, which I was really surprised with you guys. We can get into that in a bit, but no matter, it's not an up and a down, or I'm above you and you're below me. It's just we're in a different place on the sides of each other, and we can learn so much from each other. Whether you've left the country or not is irrelevant. I just think a lot of people get wrapped into the competitive nature of existence and feeling like if you did something that I didn't do, I'm supposed to be made feel less, or that I'm missing out, or I did something wrong.
It's a great point because, you know, as Americans, we have a competitive nature about us.
Yeah.
It's a capitalistic way of life that we're accustomed to, you know, and I'm talking to people and I'm not asking provoking questions about their lives or about if they met Avicii and hung out with them for 3 days, but they're finding ways to plug these experiences that they've had in their lives that they think is going to impress me. So it's not so much a conversation I'm finding sometimes with some of my American friends or some new Americans that I'm meeting. It's more of, I'm going to wait till you get done talking, and then I'm going to plug all the cool things and try to talk about what I want to talk about to you.
Yeah.
Which is only an American thing. I didn't find that with, you know, the Europeans, the Asians, South Americans, and the Australian, New Zealanders. They're very a bit more considerate. They want to have a conversation. They want to listen.
Sure.
And that's one thing that's easy to slip back into when you come back home, right? I always have to check myself when I'm speaking to somebody and they start plugging certain things that they've done, and I didn't ask for those things to be plugged.
Yeah.
And it takes me back to the idea of that competitive nature that you speak about. And I think once you see America from an outsider's perspective, you start to understand why they have these notions and these feelings that aren't always so great about us.
Sure,
right?
Sure. And just 2 points about that is, one, it's super easy to be critical of your own country. Spent the most time here, grew up here, saw it in a certain perspective before you did something else. And 2, it's the biggest criticism that most Americans have. It's also the reason that the country has been on the trajectory that it's been on for so long, is because we're told you're the most important. You could be the president of the United States. You could rule the free world and govern over the world. And you have to buy into that idea to do some of the things that are so audacious. You know, like somebody, I don't know, Elon Musk is a good example, is going to revolutionize the automobile industry, the solar industry, the satellite industry, the rocket industry. Now, you can say he's critical and you can say it's going to be good or successful or not. We're not here to say any of that, but he's changed the trajectory of what this world was on, for better, for worse. We don't need to get into that. So, back to your point, it's not here. We're not here to America bash. That's the last thing that we're going to do. But
that's not what I'm trying.
No, not at all. And I just want to say, like, we can only provide the most feedback and analysis on this country, because it's like, no matter how many places we've been and how many things we've seen, this is where we have the most insight and experience. There's also a lot of people who don't do stuff like that. There's a lot of people, you know them in your friends group when they plug everything they've done, and you know all your friends that don't plug anything. You ask them, hey, what have you been up to? Not much, man. Just hanging out. It's like, this is a very real answer. You know, when some guy's like, oh, I went to Bed Bath & Beyond last week, and I just like refinanced my car. And my mom's cat like threw up on the carpet. Like, dude, that's, it's a nice enough story, but you're just like trying to pull things it's okay if nothing happens. Isn't that most of your life?
Sure.
Nothing's really happening, and it's okay. You don't have to feel that pressure to like compete. So I don't want to bash too much, but to your point, it's very true, and it does happen.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, I feel like, like I said before, it's just in our nature to compete. And like you said, it's the reason why we have been so successful and we're pioneers of the world. But it's also something that we could dial in a little bit more and kind of dial back on. And it's not everyone, but it's certainly a culture that lives among us here in the United States.
Yeah. I love the whole like stay humble, stay hungry kind of movement. I really appreciate that. People will recognize the good work that you do if you do it. I don't think self-promotion is necessarily the most evil thing in the world, but yeah, there's a fine line that a lot of people cross sometimes. And the worst part is when you see someone have a big level of success that is very self-promoting. You think that's the way to do it, and I'm neither here to say do it or don't do it. Just think about it. Just know what you're doing when you're doing it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So now we've kind of taken this trajectory on like a storytelling mode, which I kind of like. We're kind of going through the life and times of Eagle here and the travel and coming back home. So I want to focus on where we left off, which was you get back to America, you have this episode with your family and your friends, you start working again at a solar company. You do fairly well, and your whole motivation this whole time was not to immerse yourself and get established back in Charleston or back in America. It was, let's get some capital and let's go hit chapter 2. Yeah?
Right.
So why was that? Why did you not decide, hey, I've had enough, I'm going to tap out, let the young guns go do this thing? Why did you decide, hey, I want to go for round 2?
So just a quick point, a little rewind here. When I got the job in Vietnam, it was the first time somebody handed me a microphone in a room of 150 people, right? I had never had that kind of stage before. And personally, I didn't know what I was great at yet. I was still growing. I was still growing up in Charleston, any hometown with your friends you grew up with. Those friends they know a certain version of you. And it's very easy for them to start to project what they think of you, but also their own limitations onto you. Okay, when you travel and you start meeting new people, they see you in a different light, and a lot of the time they'll encourage you to do things that you've never done before. And when that happened, I started to realize what I was good at. I remember working and I'm giving speeches to 150 people a day, and one of my good friends that I had met at the time, his name's Jared. He's from Melbourne, Australia. He was the DJ on the island at the time. He said, "Hey, man, you are amazing at this. This is what you do." And just that simple sentence of him just, kind of saying, "Hey, you're good at this," just pushed me to want more of that. So fast forward, coming back home, I realized that, okay, my friends back home are kind of limiting me. They know a certain side of me that I'm not really that person anymore. I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to see new places and learn a little bit and try new things and learn a little bit more about myself. Because I'm not growing here. So I think it really came down to growth. I didn't want to be stuck. So, I went out and grinded. I was very lonely that year, and I made probably 15, 20 grand that I saved up. It was like 17. And I said I was very bored, and I was just kind of in a zone, of doing the same thing over and over again every single day, going to the same places with the same people. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go to Everest. I need that awakening. Let's fly to Nepal.
That's a normal feeling people have. They just wake up one day and they say, I'm going to go Everest. I mean, there's obviously many people that do. I wouldn't say everybody has that feeling. So, like, what does that even entail? When you Sure. Yeah, no, real quick though, but it's like, yeah, when you have that thought, obviously you've done some research, you have some insight, and you kind of know what that entails. So yeah, break it down.
Yeah, it was kind of calling a friend of mine from Australia. His name's Matthew. He's from Tasmania, and just kind of saying, hey, what do you think about going to Nepal and hiking base camp? And him kind of saying, yeah, but we can't do that. Like that's not just something you do. And so
this is something that you prepare for, right? That you like plan for years in advance. And this is not something you're like, look, right, in a month, let's go.
Right. It took me one Google, and I mean this from the
one Google
search, hiking base camp, without a tour, basically.
Sure.
And a blog popped up, and it said it's super easy to do. Here is the route you take. This is how much time it takes. This is the acclimatization days that you need to take. This is how much it's going to cost you. And I texted my buddy Matt, and I said, we're going to go to Everest. I've done the research already, and this is how much it's going to cost, and we're going to do it without a guide. We're going to do it by ourselves. And he texted back, you are out of your mind. I am not going with you.
Chicken.
And slowly, he started to do his own research, and we realized that this, concept of, you can't go to Nepal and hike up Everest by yourself to base camp. You can't do that, was a fallacy. It was so far from the truth.
Sure.
And so we said, okay, let's fly to Nepal. We'll go to Kathmandu, and then we'll decide once we're there if we're going to actually go up the mountain. We flew out to Nepal. I met him in Nepal, Kathmandu. We stayed for 3 nights, and it was freezing cold. It was, if we didn't go that day, the next day, it was about to be the season where you can't go anymore because it gets so cold on the mountain.
Right. Seasonality.
Right. And I mean, these tours are like $8,000. These tours are expensive compared to $700. So we got to the hostel. We started talking to people, right? As you do as a traveler, you get to a new place, you get to a hostel, you start talking to people that have been in that country and done all the things that you want to do, and you get insight from them.
It is just to touch base. So that hostel, you got to drop that line. It is the fastest way to get most relevant information to you, tailor-made, firsthand experience. It's the most up-to-date information too, because somebody just did maybe what you want to do the day before. Right. Yeah, invaluable. It's the
best blog. It's the best. It's the best research you can do. Just go to a place and talk to the travelers at that hostel. So we get there, and I'm talking to a couple people, and they're like, "It's super hard. Don't do it. You guys are going at a really bad time. It's going to be, and you're going without a guide. No way." And I talked to some people that said, "Super easy. You guys will be able to do it so fast, so easy, not a problem." We had a decision to make. You have to take the most dangerous flight in the world. It's now the second most dangerous flight in the world, from Kathmandu to about 9,000 feet to a town called Lukla. And it is a sketchy little ride. You're in a tight little plane. There's only one row on each side. There's about 7 people on the plane. And the flight attendant hands you a mint as soon as you get on the plane, and she straps in the back. And nobody gets up the entire time. You can see into the cockpit. So, once we got to the runway is hanging off of a cliff like this, and then there's sheer drop. So you land, okay, and then there's a mountain right here. He has to hit the brakes and take a quick right.
How many people are in this airplane? What does it hold?
I think it's 14. 14 people.
And is it propeller?
Propellers.
Prop plane.
Yeah.
Wow.
Prop plane. So, and I mean, you're moving. He's pulling a switch and it drops down. He's touching another button and it's popping you up, and the wind's messing you.
So constant turbulence. And I'm guessing this airplane is not fresh off the production line.
It is not. I remember somebody telling me that it's actually not. There's a worldwide aeronautical kind of department that says you're approved to fly and we recognize you as like a safe flight.
Sure.
I forget what the thing's called, but it wasn't approved.
Yeah.
So you're taking this flight at your own, and people die very regularly.
What was the cost of this flight at the time, and how long was it?
It was $150, and it was about an hour and 30, I believe.
It was one way.
Yeah, it was a one way, and then you buy your return on the other way.
Okay.
It
would be smart if they.
It
would be smart to charge a round trip, because if you die, then they just get to keep the extra 150.
Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that was an option, but we didn't take that option. Being the cheap travelers that we are. But yeah, so luckily I was with two guys from Tasmania that are super tough. They've been hiking in the outdoors their entire lives, and they were in great shape. I was not. I was eating cheeseburgers. I gained 50 pounds since coming home.
50.
50 pounds. Yeah.
I
believe it was 55. I was at 245 pounds when I left home again. When I came home, I was at 190. So
you gained about 20 kilos.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it just had a lot to do with my depression at home. The food that I was eating, I was never cooking for myself. I wasn't.
Sure.
I was very lonely, and Charleston's a pretty slow place. There's not a whole lot going on, so
and
eat.
Yeah, and for the international community, that is listening to this, that's not an uncommon diet for not just a bummer year. That's a common diet for like a bummer decade or a bummer lifetime that people, quote unquote, live on. So wow, right. Dude. So okay, so you're like at 245. How tall are you? You're like 6'2"?
6'3".
6'3". I don't think you're that tall. I think you think you're 6'3". We all think we're at like an inch tall.
We're on record.
Okay? Yeah. All right, 6'3". You can have it. It's on the record.
But yeah, so I'm like completely out of shape. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's go to Everest and hike this mountain.
At least you like had a thick blanket of body fat on you for this trip. There's one benefit, right?
Exactly. So the plane hits the runway, okay, hits it, pops back up, turns sideways, comes back straight, and lands again. And we're good. Slams on brakes, barely makes that right, and we're good. We're there.
Wow.
I almost had a heart attack. My buddy's almost had a heart attack. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, and we have no idea what we're doing. We start walking through the village, just kind of following the path. We start looking at the Nepalese and people that are just working and living, the locals, and we're like, Everest base camp, that way. And they just pointed us down the path. And I think we hiked for about three hours that day. Pretty easy day. I was like, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. We stayed the night, had a beautiful little, bed and breakfast kind of thing. And then the next day was the hardest day of my life. That was 7 hours straight up. Grueling hike. And I wasn't prepared for it.
You didn't take an extra day? Oh, because you guys are on such a tight timeline, right? Because the weather's changing and you need to get in and out as quick as you can, yeah?
We did it pretty quick. We got up there in 8 days. We got back in 3. So usually you want to take 14 days, I think.
Okay.
But we try to do it a little quicker. I remember getting up that first, the second day, 7-hour hike, and crying. We got to the bar. I sat in a corner at the bar we were at in Namche Bazaar, which is a beautiful little town cut into the side of the mountains, the Himalayas, and I just cried. The bar was full, and I said to myself, I'm not going to be able to do this. Luckily we had an acclimatization day the next day, so I could sleep in. We were going to do a little hike up, but at that point, I'm thinking to myself, I bit off a lot more than I can chew.
Mm-hmm.
The days only got harder. But luckily I had my friends with me pushing me, and waiting for me, because they could have ran up that mountain. I mean, they weren't having any trouble at all with the hike. Yeah, we got to about 14,000 feet, and I got altitude sickness. So 14,000 feet, I didn't take the altitude sickness medicine, but at 14,000 feet, that's the cutoff. You have to take it before you get to 14,000 feet. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So my head's pounding. I could feel my heartbeat in my head. Massive headache. Still got a really steep hike to finish. And I just told the guys, I got to sit here because I think I'm going to be hurt. We get up. It went away. We get up. 30 minutes later, sat down, fine, got up, and this guy comes walking at us, and he's like, "Listen, there's a little, homestay right there, but if you keep walking, there's a pyramid of solar panels. Okay, and inside they have showers, fresh food, electricity, TV, heat." And I kind of looked at my buddies and went, "Are we hallucinating right now? Like, that's for sure not a thing. That's definitely not it." So we just stayed at that one place because we were like, we're not going to go try to find this solar panel. That guy could have just been in our imagination. Sure enough, the next day we walked and we found this like pyramid, like 16,000 feet up, pretty close to base camp. And it's just a pyramid of solar panels tucked away in a corner of the mountain. And we had showers for the first time in 7 days, and we ate good food, and we just relaxed, and it was amazing.
So what is this? You can't just glaze over this pyramid thing. What is this? Is this like a hotel or a building that somebody made? Like, give me all the info you got.
It's a hotel. No idea who made the hotel. It was only one guy who was working really hard. He didn't speak any English. The accommodation was beautiful. And at that point, when you get up that far onto Everest, it's kind of like Mars. So everything is barren. It's kind of like a desert. There's no more yaks. There's no more animals. There's like these little penguin things that are walking around, but you're kind of like, that's probably not real. That might be. There's 50% oxygen up there. So your brain starts playing tricks on you. You start having weird dreams. You start thinking weird things. And so I was kind of in shock at the pyramid place. It almost didn't feel real, until I really had that first hot shower in 7 days. And I was like, whoa, okay, we're here. There's 2 more days to hike and we're done. To get there. And, we finished strong and we flew back down that mountain. I mean, the night before we got to base camp, we decided 3 of us to stay in a 2-person bedroom, and my buddy would sleep on the floor. There was a crack in the window. It was cut out. So you're basically sleeping outside.
Sure.
There's no heat. The window's basically open. The toilet's frozen when you wake up. Wake up at 3 a.m. and my buddy can't breathe. He's screaming, "I can't breathe. I can't." We had sucked all the oxygen out of the room, and he was so low on the ground that all the oxygen was at the top of the room, and he wasn't getting any at the bottom where he was sleeping.
Really?
And it's so cold, man. It's like negative 35 degrees outside, So you have this massive blanket over your head, and you're just like peeking out like, "Are you okay, man?" But you don't want to get out of bed because it's freezing.
Sure.
And he just had to take a minute. He opened the door. He went to the bathroom, and he was okay. But scary moments like that,
wow.
Where you don't know if you're going to be all right. You don't know if your friend is. There's nobody up there to call.
Yeah.
There's you're not with a tour guide who knows what they're doing. You're alone. And when we made it to Everest, we all just kind of sat there and just took it in for like 2 hours when we made it to base camp. And you literally walk down a path, and then there's some flags, and that's it. You see the big ice sheet, which is the next point past base camp when you try to summit.
Mm-hmm.
There's no tents. I didn't see any tents. I didn't see, we didn't go down into the camp part. We just reached the end of the base camp where they say this is camp 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
That was it. Then you turn around and walk all the way back down the mountain, which is a tough hike.
Sure. It took you 8 days in, 3 days out.
Wow. 8 days in, 3 days out.
So you
have to realize
you're what at this point? You're 20 pounds lighter after this experience?
I mean, I'm running down the mountain. I'm killing it on the way down.
We got all that. You got all that. You got all that momentum.
Yeah. Here's a misconception. I say coming down the mountain, 3 days in, you're hiking up for 2 hours, but you're also hiking down for 4 hours and then up for 5 hours. You know what I mean? Right. So the hike back is really hard as well. There's a lot of steep up parts on the way back, which I felt great about going down. And then I met you shortly after that, didn't I?
So
flew to Thailand.
So at that time, I was having a similar experience, not as it pertains to hiking, but I had just finished my 2 months in India.
Right.
Which was, at the time, that was my big, I'm not allowed to go home because I'm about a year into my trip. I'm not allowed to go home until I go to India. I told myself I built it up in my mind because I didn't know anybody who'd ever been. And anybody who ever been, they went to like the Golden Triangle, which is like Delhi. I can't even remember the parts of it, but it's I don't want to say it's basic, but it's very planned. It's very structured. There's not a whole lot of surprises on this type of India trip. But it's inspiring when you see people do it. So yeah, I had just spent 2 months there. And I was broken. I was tired. I had so much food poisoning so many different times throughout the trip. It was one of the most difficult things I had ever done culturally, financially. It was really, really cheap. And I told myself, I want to make this the cheapest it can be within the cheapest country. I want to travel like a common person. I want to do everything. Because like we talked about earlier, I want to see what it's like. I want to know what a day-to-day individual in this country has to go through. I don't want to go stay at a 5-star resort and be totally disconnected from society and just say like, oh, I went to India and it was beautiful. I'm like, no, I want to say it was hard. And I saw the social economic differences and I saw people driving brand new Mercedes right past somebody living in the dirt in a tin shack. You know what I mean? Not selling something random, living right next side by side. So I had a lot of mental questions about like, what are we doing in this world? Why have governments, let people live like this? I was going through a lot. And I thought, where was the one place that would bring me some peace and quiet? And that is a little island in Thailand called Koh Tao. It's very quiet on one side, and then there's a big party on the other side. So I went to the quiet side. I spent 1 week completely by myself, didn't talk to anybody. My good friend from Sweden was, we had traveled a bit in Indonesia. And he's like, hey, I'm coming out to travel for a little bit again. He's like, where are you at? And I said, oh, I don't know where I'm going to be. I'm in India. He's like, well, I'm going to be in Thailand with a friend for a week. So like, let's hang out. So he ends up meeting me in Koh Tao. And shortly thereafter, we came across your crazy ass and also another friend of ours, Max. Hope you're listening, Max. And the 4 of us joined Powers. And to be honest, everybody, can I say this part? First of all, before I even dive into this, what an amazing story about Nepal. I had never heard that whole long rendition. I had only heard snippets, so it's nice to get the full thing. I mean, obviously an experience like that has had to change you. What did it make you think about your mental capabilities and also your physical capabilities? Did it change your priorities as health, wellness, Did it do any of that?
I think it gave me that confidence again that I had. My self-esteem had become so low being back home and gaining weight and not really growing, and to be able to leave home in terrible shape and just say, hey, I'm going to go hike up Everest without a tour guide and everybody telling me I'm crazy, and to be able to accomplish that feat just kind of built that desire inside of me. That fire was back. I was just ready to take on the world again. So it just gave me that self-esteem and that confidence of I can do anything I want. Oh, wait, nothing, there are no limits on me, actually. Right. I remember that kind of brought me back to that. So, yeah. And obviously you go hike Everest for, 11 days, you start eating better afterwards. You're in better shape. You want to work out. It just kind of shocks your system. And that was the beginning of me getting into the best shape of my life. And then meeting you and you inspiring me to stay in shape as well was great as well.
I started a rumor about Egal because he had made this transformation, and he kind of confidently said, like, hey man, the last year I was kind of struggling with my weight and my diet, and I did this Everest thing and I lost some weight, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I was proud of you, man. I really was. But I'm a jokester of sorts, I guess. And I started like meeting people, and I would tell them about Egal, and I was like, did you know Egal? He lost like a bunch of weight. And they were like, oh, really? Like a bunch of weight? And it's like, yeah, the dude, he used to weigh like 400 pounds. And he used to have, and also part of the story is that he used to drive a little rascal scooter because he was so big, you had a hard time getting around. And I sold that story to, I don't know, maybe 10 people or plus. And then
everyone we came in contact with.
Yeah.
Especially the best looking.
The best looking as well. The best looking of the opposite sex. And then you would tell a story, and you would talk about dropping all this weight, and everyone would be like, yeah, it's really impressive. Like, it's incredible that you did that. And nobody really knew like that he was talking about, 20, 30 pounds or whatever, or 40 pounds. And I was telling everybody it was like 150 or 200 pounds, which is very impressive. So, and anybody struggling with their weight, I encourage you, if you want to drop 200 pounds or 50 pounds, it's possible, either way.
Yeah. If your best friends are looking at you and saying things like that, it definitely encourages you to continue
on your journey. I don't think I would make such jokes if you were not in good physical health and good mental health as well. Usually the only time you kind of rag on somebody at that level of ferocity is because they're in such a good spot. They can take it. You don't rip on somebody who's struggling,
Right. That's kind of our dynamic as well, right? We love each other, but we're kind of like brothers where, we pick on each other, and it's funny.
You have to, in my mind.
Just so people understand that part of the dynamic.
Sure.
For don't know that.
Yeah.
He's not an evil guy.
No.
He's just...
I'm not an evil guy, I promise. But with that said, I remember when we met. So today you just said, I view you as a brother, as like family. We're connected. We can pick up the phone. It can be a week. It can be a month. It can be 6 months. And it's like no time has passed. But first impressions, we butted heads, as many of me and my good friends do. I don't know what that is. Some people say it's the alpha male mentality. I've never viewed myself as like the alpha male of anything. So I don't know what it is, but you rubbed me the wrong way. I wasn't impressed. But Lucas has always been the voice of reason. And he said, nah, he's just American, like he's a good guy. He's like, you were the same way. And I was like, oh, really? Okay, fine. I guess we'll hang out. And we traveled around different parts of Thailand together, which we'd all been to Thailand at that point. It was like not a victory lap, but it was just like an easy lap. You go to these places, you do the party, you get away from the crowds, you hang out over here, you do something different. We went to Indonesia together. I bought your ticket to Indonesia, didn't I?
You did, yeah, you did. I can't remember what was going on with like...
When you book from so many random websites and you're always hunting for good deals, if you have a hypersensitive American credit card, sometimes they'll put a hold on it and it's not easy to get through to your person. So then it takes time. And I was like, Egal, no excuses. We're all going back to Indonesia. You're coming with us. Here's your ticket. And I barely knew you. Like, honestly, you could have just flown to Indo, not hit us up, and I'd be out, I don't know, not even a couple $100. It was like less than $200. It wasn't much. But when you're traveling on a budget for long periods of time, dude, you're after every penny that you can hang on to, because you know that that'll translate into an extra day, an extra week, an extra month until your next income revenue source, or when you've decided to go home, whatever it may be. So I took a gamble on you. I'd like to say it paid off. You know, we had good times, man.
I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And just to put this out there so our listeners understand, when we met, I was coming from Nepal. I was by myself. After being home for a year, I was looking for another friend group to travel with. I felt pretty lonely. So my intention when I was at the hostel was trying to meet as many people as I could and make friends. But somehow through that, I feel like I came off a little arrogant to you, and you kind of, for whatever reason, just weren't feeling my vibe.
Yeah,
luckily,
for sure.
We had, luckily we had friends that, and I think the more time that went on, we started to understand each other a lot more, and that kind of went away,
I think it's very common for people that are somewhat like-minded and similar characteristics to initially butt heads. They're like, hey man, the friend group already got one of me. We don't need two of us. Yeah, you go find your own. So we're coming out of Thailand. We have, we don't need to dwell on this topic too long because it's a very stereotypical place that a lot of people have been, and I think I've covered this in different podcasts, but Thailand is a great beginner country to travel to. If you've never spent any time out of your home country, not just the US, your home country, I really think Thailand is just super user friendly. It's affordable, it's organized, it's fun. The food is great. The country is beautiful. The people are awesome. You can't go wrong. Do your research. There's so many different places in Thailand, but you'll have a great time. And I think if it's your day one spot, I highly recommend it.
Thailand's that gateway country, right? Thailand, you go to Thailand, you get the culture shock, but you also start to realize how people live in harder parts of the world. Then you can go do tougher countries, maybe a Vietnam, a Cambodia after that. And then the pinnacle being like an India, right?
Sure.
Something that's just going to kick you right in the face.
Right in the teeth.
Yeah, Thailand's awesome. We would always go to Thailand, right? You do something hard, you go to Thailand to relax for a month. So yeah, love Thailand, but after going to Thailand so many times, I think, and after traveling so much, probably don't want to go back.
Yeah.
Right? Even though we know we'll both find ourselves there.
We will both. I'll already admit to that. I'll be back in Thailand for sure. But the thing about Thailand is I would love it. It's like my number one layover country. Like if I'm like, oh, I got a flight, but I need to like kill a week somewhere, dude. Right. Bangkok, any of the southern islands. The north of Thailand is also really beautiful. Like, can't go wrong. But we mentioned this like earlier before we started talking that you've tied this in really well because you talked about Nepal, and a lot of people get roped into either, whoa, like that's not something you do. 2, if you're going to do it, it requires a lot of planning. And 3, if you've decided to plan to do it, you've planned it so far in advance that you have flights, you have a guide, you have your backup plan, you got your airlift me out of here plan, you have all this stuff. So when you and I were hanging out in Bali, you had approached me and said, hey, let's go next door to this island, Java, and let's go to Mount Bromo and Mount Ijen. And I think at the time, I don't know what it was. I think you already went to Bromo, right?
I had gone to Bromo previously, right before that, actually, with a couple friends.
Right before that.
I flew there and then took a bus to Bromo.
So you just cruised it, super not impeding your ability. Like somebody else did it for you. They just took your body to the mountain. And Bromo is just really beautiful. There's not really much hiking, right? You're just kind of there.
Yeah, there's virtually no hiking at all.
Sure.
Yeah, you're just kind of there.
So Eagle approached me and said, yo, let's go to Mount Ijen. And I'm like, I'm not really like a tour Sunrise Mountain type of guy. And you're like, no, we can do it ourselves. And I said, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, we got to drive our motorcycles for about like 2.5, 3 hours to the northern port of Bali, take a ferry over. It's another 45 minutes to an hour, super close. Like the islands almost touch. And then we got to drive to the base, and then we got to walk to the top. And I was like, I don't think so. Like, I was like, I don't think you can just do that. Like, somebody's going to stop us and say, hey, you need a representative, you need a guide, you need to do a tour. I'm just not buying it. And I think you kind of just talked me into it. I really don't think you showed me anything. I don't really think we like reviewed any websites. I just took your word for it. We had data in Indo, so we just typed in like burp, 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 Mount Egen, and it just showed this line, and then it broke over the water, and then just back to the base of the mountain. So the first day, it was myself, you, and a friend of ours, Saskia, who I'm begging to be on. Yeah, I'm begging Sas to join the podcast. She's going to be delightful to have on. And
she's a spark of joy, that one.
Yeah, super unique individual. Yeah, shout out to Sass. So anyway, so you continue the rest of the story, because this is your episode, and I think that you'll tell a really nice version of this adventure. So we're in Gita homestay, packing up. I'm on a 250cc Kawasaki. You're on I think about 200cc. I don't even know what you had. You had kind of a Franken bike a little bit.
Yeah, I think it was a Kawasaki as well.
It was a Kawasaki as well?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I mean, I didn't do any research. I just knew that, with the Everest thing as well, it's like, okay, you get to the place, and then if, I'm seeing people hike it. I'm seeing tourists go and hike it. So how do we get there? You take a route. We're allowed to travel from island to island. And once you get there, you just talk to somebody and they'll take you up the mountain. It can't be that big of a deal. We had a big plan, you and I, to go do the north of Bali, because I had never done that. So Sass, we all took off. I think we stopped in the middle of Bali a couple times. Then we went up to the waterfalls, which was sick. And
Circumpole water. Oh, well, no, this is a ling-a-ling.
A ling-a-ling, yeah. A ling-a-ling, jumped off the waterfall. You do there's certain jumps you go down. The last one we jumped off of was really tall. I think it was like 40 something feet.
It was like,
it was a pretty big jump.
Yeah, it was like 15 meters, 18 meters. It starts at 5 meters, then goes to 10 meters, and then goes to 15. The 5 and 10, you don't even think about it. You're like, no big deal. Maybe the 10's a little sketch, but then you get to the 15 or 18 foot one. And that is, we're not professional divers. And I think you went first. I think I volunteered you to go first.
Yeah, you definitely did. I didn't land great, but I was all right.
You were good,
yeah, I was fine. You landed fine. And then Saskia went.
This is how you're supposed to land. You're supposed to land like this. She landed kind of like that. Yeah. And you and I, when she hit the water, dude, you and I took off and we just started swimming as fast as we could to her. She's like, like out of breath, and she got wrecked.
She got wrecked, yeah. And so we kind of we thought about going again. We just kind of sat there, made sure she was okay. We went and got coffee. That was the day Saskia was leaving us, and we would continue the trip by ourselves right after that. Mm-hmm. You have to think about what kind of mindset she was in. She just jumped off a waterfall, hurt herself pretty badly. Now she's going to be alone riding a motorcycle and making her way back down the island. Which
is a good hour and a half to 2 hour drive. And I mean, the sun is, it's getting low. Like, she wants to do all this during daylight.
Yeah. And it's not an easy drive. I mean, it's a very hectic, windy, motorcycle ride, with a lot of cars on tiny roads. So shout out to Sass, man, because she's still out there killing it.
Absolute legend. Absolute legend.
Absolute legend. And that was actually, I think, the last time I saw Sass. But we continued our trip, and I mean, the landscape was unbelievable. Me and Andrew were on the bike all day, and dude, just blown away. You got these huge cliffs on one side, you got beautiful, color of the water is perfect to the right. we stopped off. We had horrible food.
It
At
wasn't. It wasn't horrible. It was very like.
off.
It
It was
wasn't
awful.
pretty. It was kind of cold, but I thought,
Disgusting.
yeah. But it was. I'm one of the first people. I'm pretty vegetarian these days, but at the time, it's hard to be vegetarian when you travel, especially in Asia. I would just eat anything, and I would deal with the consequences. If I got food poisoning, I got food poisoning. But at least I knew what that food tasted like, and there were a lot more wins than there were losses. The losses were hard, but a lot more wins. And you're one of the few people that will go, pound for pound, punch for punch with, I'll eat it. I don't care if it's got a head on it or a face on it, or if I've never
Yeah,
heard of the animal before.
yeah. Part of the diet, right? Get yourself sick, and then you lose a little weight.
If you get yourself,
Kind
I don't think a lot of people know this though, but if you like get food poisoning and you get a little bit sick, and somehow you get food poisoning again, it's almost not nearly as bad. It's like you build this kind of toughness and tolerance, and the body is very capable. I'm surprised at different times that I've done well, but also the north of Bali, very up and coming. It's not super overly tourized as the south is right now. It's very up and coming. I highly recommend getting up there. When the borders open up.
beautiful, beautiful. And I think so. We left there, and was that the day we were going to cross the ferry? Right? We did all that.
So
One
we
day.
spent the night when Saskia left us. She headed back to Canggu. You and I went up to the northern coast. I forget.
Did Lavina.
No, we didn't do Lavina. We only did the two waterfalls, I thought. Or did we stop in Lavina for like a drink or something?
Yeah, we might have stopped.
We stopped at the national park. So anyway, Saskia left us. We spent the night in the northern coast. We continued down, and we stop at there's a national park in the northwest of Bali. And we just pulled in. We had like one of those little cafes, powder cafes. I had one. And we just hung out, had some food. Again, very questionable food. It was not anything fancy by any means. And then we went to the port, and it was time to cross. And to cross into Java, you're supposed to have the registration of your motorcycle, and it is supposed to be the original copy. And I from my place, I was like, yo, this is the registration. I need it. And they're like, oh, yeah, here's the registration. Just take it, and they should let you through. So we get there. They look at yours. No big deal. Here's your registration. Here's your ID. Go for it. They look at mine. They're like, this isn't the original registration. And I'm just like, my God, like, how could I have made this mistake? And I was like, listen, it's what they gave me. The English isn't so great. These are not tourist Indonesians. These are police. You know what I mean? They're not all English speaking. So we kind of wrestle back and forth. I think he says, give me some money, kind of. He doesn't say it out loud. He just kind of gestures it. So I give him I didn't even give him that much. I gave him like 50,000, which I think is the equivalent to like $3.5 US. And he just kind of looks at me and he's like, go ahead. just waves us through. Yeah. And then we were on our way. And then we parked on the boat.
Well, it's funny because we actually took different ferries. So I went ahead of you.
Oh, yeah. Right? So we leave the little dispatch and we kind of follow these roads. And for some reason, we just take different little pathways and we end up at different ferries.
Yeah. So we and I don't know, I'd love to hear your story, your ferry ride, but my story, I'm on the ferry and I'm hanging out with these old Indonesian guys and they're playing cards and nobody speaks a word of English and we're having the time of our lives just through body language. We took that whole trip over and they're playing cards and I'm just kind of sitting there laughing and making fun of me and I don't know what they're saying. It was great. It was awesome. Hopped on the bike, took off, and I think I met you. I think it took us a minute to find each other because I had to wait on you, or you were waiting on me, one or the other.
I want to say that I took off first from my memory because I remember pulling out and like I had my bike parked in the downstairs of the ferry, and I had walked to the top. And I look over and I don't see your motorcycle down there, and I look across and you're on a completely other boat. And we just kind of looked at each other and just kind of shrugged and figured, there's no other place these ferries are going. You know what I mean? So screw it. So yeah, I think I get there and I pull off. Maybe you get there first. I don't know. But how long is a ferry ride? 35 minutes, 45 minutes? Short.
It's quick.
Yeah.
And once we got to Java, so we meet back up, and I mean, it's just a completely different world. You know, it's crazy that 35 minutes on a ferry could completely change the culture, the landscape, the food. Everything was different from my perspective.
Yeah.
Now, me and you are we're faced with the task of having to find a place to sleep, and we have to get closer to the mountain. We didn't have any accommodation lined up, and we just started riding.
Yeah,
right. And
we're roughly, I think we're roughly like 2-hour drive, maybe 3-hour drive. I can't remember exactly, from the port to the base of Egen, but it's getting kind of late. So we're basically we kind of just drew a line to the mountain and follow the roads to get to the mountain and figure logically there has to be a place to stay between the port and the mountain, and we're going to drive past it, and that's how we're going to pick it.
Right. Unfortunately, it wasn't that easy, right?
Yeah.
So the sun's going down. We're in a very small town on Java, and because we actually, now I remember, we did book a place. Okay, we were looking on Hostel World. We booked a place, but it didn't exist.
We showed up. We went to the address. We're lined up on the GPS, and then we like knock on a door of a house, and they're just like, "What the fuck are you doing here? Like, there's nothing here for you." Yeah. And we're like, "Okay, peace."
Me and you start getting a little worried at that point, right? I mean, I know I was like, okay, it's dark now. We have no idea where we are, and we don't have a place to stay. And we're trying to find these places to sleep online, and none of them exist. I remember we must have went to like 5 or 6 places.
We went to some dead end. We went to some like dirt windy road, and it dead ended. Then we went to another dirt road where I felt the same way. I was like, there's no way there's going to be a place to stay here. And eventually we did find a place.
I'm pretty sure we talked to somebody that led us there, right?
Maybe they pointed us in the right direction, yeah. But we did eventually find a spot. Yeah.
And what a spot. I mean, hole in the wall, cold water, the whole deal, but the absolute nicest host we could have ever met. And at that point, you spoke pretty, a good little bit of Indonesian, enough to like.
I spoke a little, yeah,
a little bit, but enough to say a couple phrases to where, hey, I'm familiar with your culture and I love your culture. And the guy started speaking back to us in Indonesian. He was speaking in English like, hey, it's really easy. There was a German couple that was there. We started telling them how easy the language was, and we met them. And we tried to get some sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which wasn't so easy because it was a tough little we were roughing it in there.
Yeah. I mean, it was bare minimum accommodation. I think we had to plug our things into the wall, and there was like one plug with like 10 converters in it. And I'll post the picture when we air this. It's just this big wad of like electrical fire hazard. Yeah, we get some sleep, and I remember talking to the German couple and the Indonesian host, and we were talking about like, hey, we're just planning to drive to the base of the mountain and hike it. And he's like, oh, no. You can't do that. He's like, you have to do a tour. And he's like showing us, look, I have a tour. Look at this Jeep and all these things. And like, you can book with me. And I was like, how much is it? And I don't know. It was like almost $100 US. And I was like, nah. So you and I finish our breakfast. I think we tried to say no. And he was like, oh, okay, like think about it, And I think we finished our breakfast, we paid our bill, and we just hit the road, just started going for the mountain. And honestly, it was one of the most beautiful drives, especially like maybe the last 30, 45 minutes to the mountain valley summit of the mountain is just very Jurassic Park. And the fog would kind of come in and settle. And I remember there were a few times you and I just stopped just to take some photos and kind of take it all in. And at that point, it finally started to make sense that we were on the right track.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember at one point, when we started getting close, we stopped, and there was just some random Indonesians working on a power line. And we stopped, and we were hanging out with them, taking pictures, and they were super friendly. And we were just, shooting the shit, for lack of better words, on the side of a volcano. I mean, in the middle of nowhere in Indonesia.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember one of them spoke really good English. Like you'll never know who's going to speak really good English and who's not going to speak really good English. So the best thing to do if you want to talk to somebody is just try.
Yeah.
People will surprise
you. Mm-hmm. And what did we do? We stayed. We actually went to the mountain base, right?
I think
we camped that night, or
I think our biggest.
Did we home?
No. So I think our biggest mistake was we tried to do this trip 1 year too early, in my opinion, because in about 1 year they were going to finish this like infrastructure project at the base of Egen, where it would have a lot of accommodation for people who just wanted to stay one night and hike. They would have the food resources set up. Everything was about to be very touristic for this mountain because it's a very like well-traveled mountain. A lot of people do the hike, but we were just like 1 year too early. I really felt so. You and I, everything was closed. The little food shacks were not open yet because most people get like bussed in early in the morning or late at night to do the hike so they can see the sunrise. So you and I are there at like 5 o'clock. 6, maybe even like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. No, we're there earlier. We got there like noon. We're there super early.
Yeah.
We don't know what to do, so we find one guy and he rents us a tent. Remember?
Yeah.
So we end up having to sleep in the tent, and it's fucking freezing. And in the morning, then we're going to do the hike. But before we did that, you and I drove around the area because we had time to kill. We ended up playing soccer or football. I'm sorry, with some local Indonesian kids. We ended up going to this very Muslim village, finding a random restaurant. It was like a restaurant in a had like, what do you call it? Barred windows. It had like 2 or 3 things on the menu. And they actually opened it up, went inside, cooked us food, and served us food. And they were just looking at us. So all these kids came out. The whole village was staring at us. It was very much like so close to central Bali not even central Bali, southern Bali, where nobody will bat an eye if they see a tourist. They're like, whatever, there's a billion of you that come through in a day. But you go just 3 hours in the other island, just a little bit inland, and you are like an alien. You were like a whole different species to these people. Super friendly, super kind. But when they look at you with this, how has this creature come to be type of look, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you do?
Yeah, and we're massive. I'm 6'2", you're 6'3". The next tallest guy is 5'1", 5'2". We're just towering over these people, but we tried to just be so humble and like kind of timid in our body language and just like, hey, we're just here for some food. We're not trying to rock the boat, you know?
Well, we roll in on these motorcycles with bandanas on our face and kind of just, get off. And it's like the Wild Wild West, it's kind of this quiet little town. Everybody slowly starts coming out of their houses and they're kind of like, the kids are running up to us and they're like, we just want some food. Out, right? Like
you're like, this is a lovely moment, but please feed us. We're starving.
Yeah, starving, and nobody will feed us. But they were super friendly and cooked us a bomb meal. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. And I think during that time it was just so surreal for me. I was just kind of lost in it all.
Yeah, and absolutely.
And just loving every second of it. Pure euphoria, no idea what's coming next, no idea if we're in danger, if we're safe, and it's just all happening too perfectly. I mean, everything is working out for us. So,
Well, I think a lot of times when you're living abroad in any location, or even when you're living in your home country, it's really easy to get sucked into the creature comforts of life. I know the Canggu lifestyle for my friends there. They know where they're going to be eating breakfast. They know what fitness classes that they're off to. They know what meditation circles they're going to. They know about what time where they're going to go surfing, at which beach. And while all these things are lovely and beautiful, they still very much fall into the confines of a routine, which I think is very valuable for self-development. There's nothing like throwing a big old fat monkey wrench into that routine, though, and doing something completely unexpected. And those were kind of those moments where you're like, we couldn't have planned this if we tried.
No, and I mean, that's what it's all about, right? That's the moment that you grow and you start to realize, it's all connected and everything's going to work out better than you could have ever expected. Those challenges that were put in front of us were almost fun, right? They were fun to tackle compared to being at home and you have these challenges and it can start to wear on you a little bit. You're not really attacking those obstacles. You're kind of letting those obstacles attack you at times, at least for myself. That's how I feel. And it doesn't, when you're traveling and it's 7 at night in a foreign country, you have no idea where you're going to stay. And it's still fun, right? It's still exciting. And it's just really goes to show that, don't listen to people when they say you need to do the tour, you need to do it this way. You can't go up Everest in January by yourself without a guide. You can do it. Yeah. You have to go out there and try to do it. Yeah. Right.
And again, always trying to be careful. If you want to take a tour, take a tour. You know what I mean? By no means don't take. We got to support the travel industry. Things are opening up. We need those people to have jobs. But I don't think everybody's going to enjoy the experience. And that's why you got to figure out if you're a do-it-yourselfer, you want to throw a little caution to the wind and see what happens. And maybe it won't work out. And maybe it'll be the best trip of your life. Or do you want to play it safe and take a tour? No disrespect either way. I've been on a tour. You've been on a tour. And I've had a great time on all those experiences.
Amazing time. Yeah, amazing time. But just make sure that you're not limiting yourself on that. I think that a lot of the time we can get caught up with the idea that things aren't possible, and they are. They're very possible. They're very easy to do. You just kind of have to take that first step and allow yourself the chance to complete the task that's in front of you.
Absolutely. It's totally scary too for people. I don't think that there's any less fear for one person or another. It's just whether or not. There's this guy, I'm sure you've heard of him, Jordan Peterson. Yeah. And he talks about like you have to have fear in order to be brave. Because if you meet somebody who's not afraid of anything, they're not really doing anything. They're not pushing themselves like, oh, you did this really crazy thing. That's scary to me. And they're like, oh yeah, it's like not a big deal. A lot of times people are doing these really intense things, climbing giant mountains, putting themselves in scary situations, starting businesses, surfing giant waves. They're scared. They're 100% scared. But you wrestle it down and you be brave and you perform under pressure. And we're really good at that. And that's why we're here today. That's why you're here today. Somehow your lineage of family has made it this far by being brave and surviving. Same thing with mine. So keep it up. It's in our DNA.
Sure. And I mean, that's a great point. Let me say that, when I left the first time, when I left the second time, when I was going to Everest, when I was going on this bike trip with you, I was terrified. I was scared out of my mind, right?
You didn't like my driving? You didn't like following me?
You drive like a maniac. And, beyond that, though, we have these fears, right? But just taking that initial step, saying that I'm going to go on the roller coaster, getting in line and suppressing those feelings of fear, like you said, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. You just can't let them stop you from getting on that roller coaster and pulling down your harness. Mm-hmm. The rest is going to happen for you after you do that. Yeah. Great things are going to happen. So yeah, I think that's everybody's scared. It's a matter of stepping out and actually going for it anyway.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's really well said. All right, man. Well, we've been cruising away here for, let's see, about an hour and a half. Is there anything you want to talk about? Is there anything that you want to, dive into? We covered a lot today.
Well, I would like to say one thing. I had no intention of ever going to India. I had just done Nepal, and Nepal is a very similar culture, but and I love Nepal. I fell in love with it, but still, after I left Nepal, no intention of going to India whatsoever. I met you. You had just come from India. You had a headband on. You obviously dealt with some kind of trauma in recent days. And you really inspired me. You really inspired. You gave me a book called Shantaram. If you haven't read it yet, read that book. It's phenomenal. It's like 900 pages. You'll be done with it in like 3 days because you can't put it down. It's so good. And you pushed me to go to India. And I appreciate that because that was the best travel experience, the hardest travel experience, the most amazing growth that I've ever felt. And that was because you pushed me to do that. And I appreciate that. I want to thank you for that. But also, it goes to show that when you travel and you meet new people, they're going to push you to do new things. And those things are going to turn out to be the best things you've ever done. You're going to grow, you're going to learn about yourself, and you're going to come into my own. So that's what it's all about, man. Yeah. People like you, you know?
Well, thank you for the kind words. I want you to know that all the sentiment and energy and emotion that's just like reflected right back at you, man. You've definitely made me reconsider my attitude when it comes to interacting with people. I think I've grown a lot with my judgment and always keeping in mind of giving people an opportunity. Because a lot of the times if you have a problem with somebody that you don't know, it's because you possibly have a problem with yourself and you're projecting on someone else. So if it wasn't for Lucas saying, hey, this is a nice guy, I don't think we would have had the friendship that we have today, and we wouldn't have the stories that we got to share with everybody today, which I hope they enjoyed.
Sure. Yeah, shout out to Lucas, by the way. Love you, buddy. Looking forward to watching your guys' podcast.
Yeah, make sure to tell him that because he's a little unsure, I guess I would say. So make sure that just let him know how good of a guest he would be.
I will definitely. I'll be reaching out to him very soon.
Very good.
We didn't touch on India. We didn't touch on Australia. You know, we could sit here and talk for 7 hours about both places, but we'll save that for another episode.
I think, yeah, we can also drop on more in Vietnam. There's a lot more stories to be told. There's an endless amount. There's a wealth, and I really inspire everybody listening to go make your own story. You know, because the second you make your own story, you can be on the podcast. And you can start to have your own opinions about these things, and I hope they're not far off dreams. I hope that we can connect with people. And again, I'm always looking for insight. I'm always looking for ideas. I'm hoping that this thing will have a great community reach and that we can collectively make it better and better as time goes on.
Yeah, awesome, man. How to Kick It with your boy Andrew Irwin, killing the game. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Thanks, Eagle. Take care, everybody. See ya.